Okay, we're on Sheviit, Perek Hey, Mishnah Vav. Perek Hey, Mishnah Vav. The next couple of Mishnayot turn to a very, very fascinating topic. The topic is, to what degree are we responsible to, is a religious Jew responsible to make sure that non-religious Jews follow the halachah? We believe that God wants us to rest on Sheviit. He wants people not to plant, not to plow, and to follow the mitzvot of Sheviit and to leave the land fallow. In addition, we believe that there are ramifications. There are spiritual ramifications. There are religious ramifications. There are national ramifications to a failure to do so. So to what degree is it our responsibility to make sure that those people who are not Shomer Sheviit either are Shomer Sheviit to whatever degree we can enforce it, and what is my responsibility to make sure that I have no part in that? It's very interesting. This is an issue that really fascinates me. I'm sharing with you, this is just today, Arutz Sheva, this morning. It happens to be, it doesn't matter which morning, you can see which morning it is. Okay? If you can't read the Hebrew, I'll read it for you. Nimna mashber b'koalitzia, we prevented a crisis in the coalition. Rak avodot shemitzilot chayim yitkaymu b'Shabbat. Only life-saving work will happen on Shabbat. And it's talking about the railroads. There almost was a mashber, probably from the Haredim, because they planned to do some of the work in order to prepare the new rail line, especially at the airport, etc. They planned to do it on Shabbat, because that would be the least annoying to people and the least disruptive of traffic, etc., etc. So this morning, Rosh HaMimshala Binyamin Netanyahu, Manah HaBoker, prevented the mashber. Why? Because he said, Raka avodot shetchiyatam krucha b'sikun chayim yitkaymu kimituchnan. They had planned to do all these avodot on Shabbat. So is it our responsibility as Torah Jews to say, yes, Haredim clearly think so. We have a responsibility to make sure that the state of Israel keeps Shabbat to whatever degree possible and refrains from violating the Shabbat. Similarly, to what degree did Chazal feel we have a responsibility to make sure that most people, to whatever degree we can, have to keep the Torah. Now, I'm going to share with you this introduction, fascinating introduction of Rav Safrai. I was going to scan it for you, but it's hard Hebrew. He says you also have to understand the socioeconomic and cultural reality of the Jewish land in the time of Chazal. I'll read you a little bit. He says the following: B'meshach kol tkufat Mishnah Talmud, throughout the entire period of the Mishnah and the Talmud, Haya ha'am ha'yehudi tachat shilton imperiali nochri. The Jewish people was under the rule of an imperial, non-Jewish rulership. V'tachat olah shel hatarbut Hellenistit Romit, and under the cultural influence of a Roman Hellenistic influence. Hatarbut hayza hayta gorem mitchara b'mishor tarbuti v'chavrati. You could be, what he says, Rab Safrai says is, you could be a Jew and a Roman at the same time. The Romans, they loved you, they had you, and they didn't care what religion you were. If you wanted to be not a Roman but a Jew, you were associating yourself with a minority and a lower socioeconomic status. Okay, therefore, there was great pressure, and there was great pitui is you're being drawn, okay, to abandon Jewish religion. So people had financial interest to live like a Roman, work like a Roman, and they would be accepted by the Romans. And you could, and you could still have your Jewish friends, and you can still, it's very fascinating and very similar to today. Therefore, Chazal could not impose Shemitah on everyone. They couldn't impose it. They could only say that Jews, religious Jews, could, have certain rules about what they could and couldn't do in order to enforce Shemitah to whatever degree they could. Okay, with that introduction, this is the introduction, a very short introduction. To me, it's very fascinating because it's so relevant, as I've shown you. Happens all the time. This is something we struggle with in Israel today. To what degree is this a responsibility? Do I want to enforce Shabbat? Do I want to force people to marry only Jewish people, which is the law in Israel today? To what degree can a minority of religious people impose the will of what we believe that God wants on a religious majority? That is relevant in times of Shemitah and times of Chazal as well, as we'll soon see. Says the Mishnah, these are the following tools that an uman, that the craftsman cannot sell on Sheviit. I'm a metal worker, I make tools. I sell my tools. Chazal came along and said, you cannot sell certain tools on Sheviit. And then I'm going to show you the Bartunuram, because we're going to see what the pshat of the Mishnah is, and then we're going to see how it sort of shifted over time. So what can't I sell? Machresha, plow. V'chol keleh, and all its subsequent, kelim, and all of its appurtenances. So basically the plow, the yoke, ha'ol, but the plow had all these kinds of like knives and sheaves and like blades and whatever, the plow. Ha'ol, the yoke. V'ha-mizreh, mizreh is they call it a winnowing fan, but think about it like the pitchfork that they used when they would winnow. Winnowing is throwing it up in the air and you want the chaff to blow away. They had a pitchfork that they would throw it up in the air. Dakar, he says, is a mattock. So if you will bear with me, I think I have here a mattock in Wikipedia. There you go. That's a mattock. Okay, we all know what it is. You use it to dig and hoe at the same time. Okay, you can't sell that either. Aval, but mochehu magal yad, he can sell a hand sickle, magal katsir, which is a scythe. These are things that are used for cutting, okay, and harvesting, but also remember, there were things growing in the ground that were mutar, and you weren't allowed to harvest in order to bring to market or to store, but you were allowed to harvest for your personal needs. V'agala, and a wagon, v'kokele, and all of its tools, implements, okay? Ze'aklal, I'm just looking at the English. This is the rule. Kol shebalachto miyuchedet la'aveira asur. Any tool whose melachta miyuchedet la'aveira, whose work, whose goal, whose purpose is for an aveira, on shmita, plowing or winnowing, etc. Asur, you can't sell. Le'isur leheter mutar. If it can be used for isur and heter, then it is mutar. I want to share with you first of all what the position of the Rambam. But the Rambam writes. The Rambam says, Amar Hashem. This is the Pirush of the Mishnah. This is introduction to our Mishnah. You cannot put a stumbling block for a blind man. And we all know that this isn't just a literal halachah. It's a figurative halachah. Hakavana bezeh. Someone who's blinded by desire or incorrect attitudes. Don't help him with his ivrono, his blindness. And add to his stray, his desire to go astray. And for this reason, you cannot help those who sin to sin. And you can't also cause them something that will bring them to sin. Therefore, the Rambam says this is the reason why a religious Jew cannot sell these tools to a person on Sheviit. Now, it's fascinating. I didn't share with you the Bartunah. In the Pshat of the Mishnah, the Safrai points this out, in the Pshat of the Mishnah, the rule seems to be all-encompassing. Okay? But in the Yerushalmi, he says, Rabbi Yonah comes along and says, so that's why chashud is someone who's suspect on Sheviit. That's why the Bartunah comes along based on the Yerushalmi and says, Lemishu chashud al Sheviit, someone who is suspect on Sheviit. Aval lemisha eno chashud, someone who is not suspect, share, he's permitted. De'eno koneh la'atzniya on Sheviit, because he's buying it now in order to save it for later. This is a stretch, if you think about it. When does a person buy tools? You buy tools because you need them right now. I don't buy tools because I want to store them in my barn. The reason I don't buy tools is because they break. Nobody buys tools in order to store them for later as soon as I'm going to need them. I have my tools. I just happened to have bought a grill. I've been milking that grill for years. You fix the parts. Finally, I couldn't fix it anymore. Then you buy a new grill and you use it right away. So what's interesting is Rabbi Yonah came along and said, like, what is the standard? What is the baseline? Can you sell or can you not sell? So in the Mishnah, it says the following. You can't sell these at all. Chashud, not chashud. It doesn't say who, yes, no. Came along the Yerushalmi and said, no. This rule is only for someone who's chashud. If you know that he's suspect, and we'll talk about what a chashud is, but a person who we know, he doesn't care. So that person you can't sell. But what happens if some guy comes in, you don't know who he is? Do I have to say, well, not let us sell this year, I can't sell that this year? The later authorities and the Yerushalmi came along and they reframed the Mishnah and said, Stam Adam, regular person you can sell to. But someone who's chashud, then you can't, because then you are aiding and abetting the committing of a sin that we don't allow. As you can tell, this issue is fascinating. We're going to get into it in a broader sense. More details in the coming Mishnayot, as well as similar Mishnayot which deal with the interaction between the religious and the non-religious public and how that plays out in interpersonal relationships. We'll stop here. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to contact me at, rspolter@gmail.com. And we'll dedicate the learning to the memory of my father, Harav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a great day.